A modern enterprise rarely operates under a single standard. Today's organizations manage quality, environment, health and safety, and information security simultaneously, intertwining frameworks like ISO 9001, 14001, 45001, and 27001 into one massive operational matrix. When you try to evaluate these cross-functional integrated systems using a traditional linear checklist, the process immediately breaks down. You cannot measure a multidimensional operation with a one-dimensional tool. To manage this exact complexity, the industry relies on ISO 1911-2026, the definitive internationally recognized framework for auditing management systems. The 2026 update strictly requires auditors to abandon static documentation reviews in favor of a dynamic, risk-weighted execution workflow. We are going to map the theoretical guidelines of ISO 1911 directly to a practical execution workflow. We will examine how advanced auditors synthesize evidence using AI augmentation and precise risk-based filters. An audit cannot survive on localized, subjective checklists. Accurately measuring enterprise compliance and driving genuine improvement requires a systemic, risk-weighted architecture. The audit lifecycle begins with Clause 6.2, initiating the audit. This phase is often mistaken for administrative scheduling. In reality, it is the first rigorous application of the risk-based principle. Before any on-site work begins, the auditor must conduct a formal feasibility analysis to determine if the audit can practically achieve its stated objectives. This involves evaluating operational visibility, verifying resource availability, and identifying strict data security restrictions that could impede the process. A major part of this evaluation is deciding between remote auditing methods, as outlined in ISO IEC TS 17012, and the necessity of physical on-site verification. In an aviation environment, for example, auditors encounter highly sensitive data like passenger personally identifiable information or crew medical records. Because this data cannot be transmitted securely off-site, remote auditing methods instantly fail here. These exact constraints are processed through a logistical risk filter. Factoring in scale and security limitations, the auditor formulates a strategy allocating on-site versus remote resources. This ensures the audit team possesses the specific technical competence and physical access required to gather reliable evidence. Initiation acts as a critical risk assessment. It mathematically and legally determines if an audit is viable before a single resource is deployed. Once viability is confirmed, the process moves to Clause 6.3, preparing audit activities, starting with a comprehensive desktop assessment of the management system. The primary goal of this document review is to evaluate the provided documentation for completeness, consistency, and currency. This builds an accurate risk profile of the auditee. Manually cross-referencing 100-page regulatory manuals against multiple standard disciplines simultaneously is highly prone to human error and oversight. To solve this, auditors utilize AI benchmarking tools to ingest these massive documents, rapidly identifying systemic nonconformities long before the on-site visit occurs. The output is a structured gap analysis matrix. It compares the auditee's manual against ISO criteria, instantly flagging gaps in red. For example, failing to integrate a product lifecycle perspective in an environmental manual demands targeted on-site follow-up. This introduces the concept of risk-weighted time allocation. Operational areas tied directly to those identified documentation gaps automatically receive a higher time allocation in the official audit plan. Similarly, areas with inherently high operational risk, like aviation ground handling or hazardous chemical storage, are heavily prioritized over low-risk administrative zones. The final audit plan is never a generic schedule. It is a surgically precise, risk-weighted blueprint dictated entirely by the preliminary gap analysis. With the blueprint set, we transition to Clause 6.4, conducting auditing activities, where the audit plan is put into action on site. At this stage, objective evidence and audit evidence become the absolute currencies of the process. Auditors collect this evidence through three primary pillars: through direct observation, conducting personnel interviews, and ongoing document review. The audit plan directs the auditor to specific targets, ensuring they are physically present to observe high-stakes activities, such as a fuel spill response drill in an operational hub. Document review also continues heavily during execution. New records are constantly requested on site to explicitly verify the claims personnel make during interviews. This continuous verification is driven by the core auditing principle of fair presentation. It is equally anchored by the principle of an evidence-based approach. These principles act as a mandatory filter. They process raw observations and documents through an objective evaluation, outputting only verified facts and preventing personal bias. If an observation cannot be objectively verified against the criteria, it is rejected entirely. Executing the audit relies entirely on this rigorous, unbiased verification of systemic realities against documented criteria. It is a strictly factual exercise, completely detached from assumptions. We then move to Clause 6.4.8, Generating Audit Findings. This is the stage where the verified evidence is formally evaluated to indicate either conformity or nonconformity. When a nonconformity is found, it must be structured with a specific anatomy to ensure the auditee can actually take corrective action. A formalized finding requires strict components: the specific standard clause, the location of the failure, a clear description of the issue, the precise objective evidence recorded, and the assigned risk level. Presenting these highly detailed findings at the closing meeting does not represent the end of the audit cycle. The process formally concludes with Clause 6.7, Conducting the Audit Follow-up. During follow-up, the audit team or managing program verifies that corrective actions were implemented and that those actions successfully resolved the underlying nonconformity. ISO 19011:2026 operates as a strategic, risk-based framework. It is designed to give organizations the precise, evidence-backed intelligence they require to systematically, continuously improve their enterprise operations.